Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Saturday. This is not a Hangouts and Headline stream. This is not a virtual legality proper. This is really just talking with me. If this is your first time here on the Hoeg Law YouTube channel, you've picked an interesting video to jump in on. But this is question time, which we've been doing since we started Patreon and Utreon support for the channel to allow folks to ask a question by support at a specific tier. Now, this used to be the only live stream that we actually had where folks could talk with me directly. That is obviously not the case since the advent of Hangouts and Headlines. So one of the things I am looking at behind the scenes is potentially changing up the tiers a little bit of support or making question time a members stream for people that do that to give a little bit of an extra boost to what it is that we do here. I would be very interested in hearing from all of you in comments or maybe running a poll or something about what you would like to see from this, because otherwise it's pretty easy to get a hold of me at this point in time because I'm doing 4 live episodes a week. I almost said a day. Sometimes it feels like that. Sometimes it feels like I'm doing live episodes all day long. I did a count yesterday. Somebody had said, "Oh my God, Rick, how many videos have you put up?" And in the 4 days that were being counted on my YouTube channel for the previous sequence in time, I think I had done 10. So it was something like 10 videos in 4 days. Maybe not sustainable, but honestly, I could have done 20. It's so hard as I guess I'm a content creator now. That's hard to get my mind around just as a general rule. But as a creator, to go in and see things hitting the news that you could talk about, and be like, at some point, I can't make 5 more videos, right? I have to make my choices here. And that's really tricky for me because I love having these conversations with you all. I love doing this. I love doing this job. Is it a job? No, it's continuing to evolve as we move on in this channel. And I absolutely love it. But yeah, I could have done a bunch more videos and I have them on the backlog and we'll see if I get to them. But it's really, really interesting. But it does mean that question time maybe isn't quite as special as it used to be. Now, we do cover Patreon questions. We do cover Utreon questions. I'll have slides ready to go. You'll get to see those a little bit larger. But we only have a couple this month, which is one of the reasons that I'm raising this issue at the top of this episode. And I think a lot of that is because, well, I'm answering your questions all the time. And so I think I would like to relook at that. If you guys have ideas, I'm always happy to have community involvement with structuring these things. We do have YouTube membership now. We're going to be putting up custom emojis very soon. We have Utreon, we have Patreon, but I want to make sure everybody's always getting good value out of that process. And you guys are absolutely wonderful. You help make this channel possible when I do spend the time to do 10 episodes in 4 days and still do the day job and run the law firm. We had a big closing this week. Yes. But it's really fantastic what you guys do. I want to make sure that it's always getting the value that it deserves from me, right? If what I can do is talk with you all, then let's make sure that it's all set up the right way. Secret McSquirrel says it's definitely a job. Yeah, it's 2 jobs. I never really anticipated doing this and practicing law at the same time. Obviously, YouTube didn't exist when I was in law school, so that wasn't something that I could anticipate. But while it is a job, it isn't quite the same as dealing with opposing counsel or answering client questions or hitting a deadline for a filing or making sure that people are happy in that regard. So it's a different feeling. It's a different job, which I guess nobody would really dispute. As between this and the practice of law, we are going to do some hangouts here. Good morning from New Jersey. Good morning, New Jersey. My wife is in the chat. Say hi to Mrs. Hoeg Law. She's working on all sorts of stuff today. We have a very exciting Saturday. It's the end of the month, which if you are a small business owner, is bills and invoices and everything else. So we're doing all of that, but having a good time. Good morning from Minnesota. Good morning, everybody. So what we're going to do here is we are going to answer the 2 questions that we got through the Patreon and the Utreon. We're going to answer them first. We're going to answer them well, hopefully. And then we're going to move on to kind of community comments. So if you're here with us, figure out what you want to talk about. get ready to @Hoeg Law or question, or of course, super chats are welcome, but that's not necessary to have this conversation with me. It's question time. So figure out what you want to do there. Get ready. And then if you highlight it with the @Hoeg Law, you highlight it with a question. Hopefully I will see it after we come back to the community questions, after we cover the supporter questions here. So that's going to be question time. As I said, we only have a couple questions. Might be a short one this month, but we'll see. As my wife likes to say, every time I mention that it might be a short one, we either go full length or longer. So we'll have to figure it out as we go. So let's take a look at the very first question. Whenever I'm reading anything written by one party, I find myself agreeing with it very strongly. But then, when reading the reply brief of the opposing party, I get the same feeling, just towards the defendant, or cross-appellant, or whatever, the other side. So I guess the question would be, how can one read legal documents while keeping critical thinking skills and avoid going, yep, they're right on all counts, every time? And this is a fantastic question. I absolutely love this. This is one of my favorite things that I learned in law school. And I think you've heard me mention it a few times in this space, which is primarily around like Supreme Court decisions, because I am not a litigator and I'm not reading briefs on the ground too terribly often. But if it is well done legal writing, then while you are reading that portion of an opinion in a Supreme Court case, or one side or the other's brief at the ground level of one of these cases, if it's well done, you should be feeling like it's convincing. In fact, if you aren't feeling that way, then it means it wasn't well done, and that particular legal counsel has a problem. You should feel like it's convincing. We've gone over some pretty important Supreme Court cases this past term, and you could hear me go through the various sides and then talk about, what I thought was convincing, what I thought wasn't, and then kind of synthesizing them. And it's that last step that I think is the trickiest step. It's the most difficult step for people to kind of work through. It's what, in some respects, law school is all about, which is, okay, you've got this convincing document on the one side. You've got what you think is this convincing document on the other side. Now you're the judge. How do you figure out exactly what's going on here? And I can't tell you that there's a one-size-fits-all answer to this question, but what I can give are a few tips as to analyzing these things, and probably some that you've already picked up if you've been hanging out with me for a while here on the channel. One of the first that always kind of raises a red flag or yellow flag for me is you look out for overcooked rhetoric, overhype, if you will. If we're talking about this in Reddit terms or something like that, you look out for the bluster. And if one side is really pounding their shoe on the table, Nikita Khrushchev style, then one of the things I think that sends up a flag for is that maybe the background of the specifics isn't as strong as it otherwise could be. It's not everywhere and always the happenstance for that particular occurrence, because some lawyers are just, well, they're narcissists and like to shout and talk about how awesome they are or how awesome their case is. But if you look out for that first and foremost, and then you do the second step where you say, okay, I've identified some bluster, Rick. Now you go and you look, is there any substance here? Is it all bluster? Is it all smoke and mirrors? What are they referencing? What precedent are they referencing? What legal concept are they referencing? What logic are they referencing? Sometimes you can peel back the onion a little bit there and say, you know what? This is all bluster. This is all an emotional appeal. This is all whatever it might be in that given brief. And you can start to analyze things that way. Similarly, even if there isn't that bluster, that's kind of the next step of reading through a document in any event, which is, okay, so hopefully they've used the building blocks of law and precedent and everything else to build up an argument that seems pretty convincing. You can go and you can look at some of the primary source material, right? Because as we have seen, say in Depp v. Heard, but also in other cases of more importance than that one, you can get lawyers that are aggressive in their interpretation of what a prior court might have said. And I say that as aggressive because we don't accuse our colleagues of lying, but you can quote things, you can use court cases that are maybe not 1,000% on point for the sentence that you just said to try to convince the court of something. So you can go, this is extra work, obviously, and look at what the actual substance of their materials are and say, oh, they mischaracterized that a little bit. Like if you were in a law firm and you were engaged in a litigation, that is what some associate would be doing, is going through and cite checking everything that is in that document to make sure that it does what it says they say it does. right? To make sure that they aren't squeezing when there isn't any juice there on one of these cases. And sometimes you find that this isn't the case. In fact, when you were watching, just going back to Depp v. Heard for a second, one of the motions to strike, and I forget which one, I apologize, you heard, I believe it was the Heard side quote a case for some purpose or another. And then in the response that you got from the Depp side, you actually had what looked like a Post-it note or a note of some kind handed over to Ben Chu, who was giving the talk for Team Depp there, from one of the associates at the back table. And he just says, that case doesn't stand for the proposition they say it does, Your Honor. It stands for X, Y, or Z. And I can't remember the specifics there, but I do remember commenting and saying, oh, look at that. The research associates just killed it. They just did their job. Because they clearly were site checking on the fly during these speeches and then said, hey, that's not what that says. And so you can go through and at a kind of fundamental level, you can analyze exactly what they're using to base things on. But sometimes everything's right and everything's right on both sides. And now you have to really be the judge, right? A judge is not called a judge because we think it's a cool name. A judge is called a judge because they do have to exercise judgment. And you do have to evaluate what are two potentially diametrically opposed positions based on your equitable fairness doctrine in your head, and other things that might otherwise come into play in a case. So what you are doing when you've got two persuasive documents that you're reading like that is you take them both and then you look at them and then you try to pair off what the arguments might be, and then you evaluate the strength of those things. And if it's helpful to you, you write a short memo. If you're in law school, for instance, more than the judge will have clerks to help with this kind of thing. But you write a short thing that says, okay, so this is what they say about this. This is what they say about this. How do I feel about that? And going down the line of all those various things. And just like a debate performance or just like evaluating a fight between two friends, chances are, if you've otherwise secured that everybody is speaking sincerely and speaking out of legitimate evidence or precedent or whatever, you can start to evaluate those things. And different judges are going to have different feelings on types of evidence or otherwise. And that's why when we talk about the Court of Appeals, or that's why when we talk about the Supreme Court, you're not talking to one judge. You're not talking to one justice, right? You're talking to 9. Sometimes you're talking to 15 if you're talking to the Court of Appeals and you've got an en banc decision. So we know as human beings that different people will interpret seemingly equal bits of evidence differently. And so we go in there and we look at it at a multiple judge level. So you're not wrong if you're looking at persuasive documents to feel that way. In fact, I think that you should. If people and lawyers are doing their jobs correctly, you should feel exactly as you described here. How to evaluate it is a little bit more facts and circumstances based. But I hope I gave you a good starting point. And thank you so much for the question. And thank you so much for the support of Virtual Legality and the Hoeg Law YouTube channel. The second question we got is a little bit shorter. This was framed as effectively a personal question, and it's a question that I love, and I've discussed a lot. I don't know that I've discussed it a lot in this space, but I've certainly talked to people a lot about it. So I suppose it's more of a personal question, but how is it going from undergrad to law school, given the significant difference in, shall we say, perceived philosophical viewpoints between the two institutions you attended? I would love to answer this question without ever referencing which institutions we're talking about. I think it would be amusing, but I will talk about it instead based on the institutions because I think it's funny. So for those of you that don't know, I went to a college called Hillsdale here in Michigan, and Hillsdale College has, especially after I left, but a little bit while I was there, taken on a certain national position as ultra conservative. And you'll see Hillsdale College advertisements on Fox News and things like that. Now, I most certainly, as you could probably imagine if you've been with me for a while, did not attend Hillsdale College for its political proclivities. I actually had a family friend that taught economics there, and we were able to chat about that. I wanted to do economics. I wanted to learn economics. I really liked their economics department. So I went there, I learned economics, and I liked how close it was to the family. I always wanted to be within driving distance. That's just the kind of guy I am. And so I went to Hillsdale, but I will tell you this. At Hillsdale, I think that mostly certainly the folks that were motivated by philosophy, including the senior management, thought of me as a very liberal person. And we don't talk about politics a lot here. And it's a funny thing, but a lot of what you are perceived as, and this can be politics, this can be any other kind of in-group, out-group, anything like that, is a function of what the group does or what the mob does if you're being a little bit less genteel about descriptions of these things. So I remember being at Hillsdale and being called a libertine or a liberal that couldn't get behind some of the philosophies that some of the people at that college like to espouse. And what's really funny about that is, of course, the second part of this question, right? So my experience at Hillsdale was that I was in the out group, and I'm not much of I'm not a very good member of that political grouping at Hillsdale. And so I went to the University of Michigan Law School, which, if you look at probably any data point, you will find is one of the most, let's call it liberal, progressive, left-leaning law schools in the country. And there, I am sure it comes as no shock to you, I was seen as ultra-conservative. So my experience as an undergrad was that I'm the crazy liberal on campus. And then in law school was I'm the crazy conservative on campus, which honestly I take as a badge of pride because I feel like I'm always working off of foundational principles. I'm always trying to talk about philosophies of politics as well as philosophies of life that are grounded in what are foundational beliefs rather than whatever the hot button topic is of the day. And hopefully I'm helping impart that kind of notion. Reasonable minds can differ to you all here in this space. But you can see, I think I referenced this when I was doing the trial coverage over on Legal Bites. You could see a New York Times article. We had an embedded New York Times reporter in my constitutional law class. You could see a New York Times reporter, because this is the way my professor perceived me, call me a conservative, known throughout campus for my conservative views, which is hilarious because I wasn't known anywhere. But you can check that out in the first paragraph of the New York Times from whatever that year would have been, 2003. And you'll see reference to Richard Hoeg being that. And I've always found that funny. And my professor was so apologetic at Michigan Law School. He calls me up. It was a Sunday, big insert. It was a big article about constitutionality and discrimination because Michigan was at the Supreme Court for this question at the time. And calls me up and says, "I'm so sorry. They took it out of context. I would never call you that." And I was like, okay, my God, what did you say, man? Right? What did you just say about me in the New York Times, professor? And it was that I was a conservative. It's pretty funny. You can also get a summary of my gunnerness because one of the reasons that I'm even mentioned at the top of that article is because I ask questions without being called on. Which is pretty funny. As a law school strategy, one of the things that I wanted to do was to not be cold called as much. So I would volunteer to talk, to ask questions, to otherwise participate in the conversation as soon as I had something I thought I could say, because I effectively wanted that. What you read in that New York Times article is being like, well, he used note cards to cold call on people. And the reason I come up is like, oh, here's Richard Hoeg. I don't have to call on him. He talks enough. And it's like, yeah, that was the idea of law school for me. And sometime maybe we'll do a video on all my many techniques in getting through law school or a video series, because I feel like it went really well for me. And a lot of that was kind of the philosophy I used. But either way, it's a fantastic question because, you see Hillsdale and you see Michigan Law and you're like, what is the deal with this guy? And I just like to keep you guessing. No, it really was. I thought that was the best place to get my education. And I wasn't really concerned about mob mentalities or people pushing me one way or the other. And so I went to both of those schools. I feel like it was fantastic for building me into the person that I have become. And I feel like it was a real push towards, reasonable minds can differ as a guiding life philosophy, because I still have friends that went to Hillsdale that are, wildly separate from my political position. And I still have friends that went to the University of Michigan Law School that are equally wildly away from my political position. I think you can see that somewhat in the way I interact on the internet and with different folks that we can talk to each other like human beings. You can talk to someone that graduated from Hillsdale as a human being, and you can talk to someone that graduated from Michigan Law as a human being. And you don't have to agree necessarily when you're done with that conversation, but you can recognize that maybe they aren't arguing in bad faith. They just have a difference in philosophy or a foundational principle or a way of looking at the world or a lens through which it is seen. And I think that is fantastic, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But it does get questions like this one, which is interesting because some people have actually come into my DM. Some people have actually come into my comments or otherwise and said, I can't listen to you. You're a crazy liberal from Michigan. Oh, okay. I've gotten a lot of comments on the opposite side. You went to Hillsdale, those crazies. I'm not watching your channel. I'm telling everybody that you're an evil arch conservative. And I say, okay, all right. I mean, like, that's up to you. I can't control what you perceive, but I wouldn't change anything that I've done for the world. It was fantastic. I got great educations in both places, very different educations at a tiny liberal arts college in a nothing town in Michigan, and then the research university in the Big Ten. But it's a great question, and I really appreciate you asking it. So thank you so much for asking the question. Thank you so much for the support. I hope that was a good answer. I want to give good answers for you, and thank you so much. So as I promised, those are the questions for today. I hope that those were useful, certainly to the people asking them, but also to the folks that are listening and watching with me. So we are going to now do community questions, community chat. I can see you're already talking over on the side, I think primarily to my wife. She's fantastic. Otherwise, but yeah, question time. Ask me whatever you like. Obviously, personal questions are up. The only thing that you can't ask me, and this is because of ethics rules, I think I mentioned it in the description. I certainly mention it when I'm calling for questions on Patreon and Utreon, is I can't answer legal questions in terms of legal advice for you. So don't ask, hey, I'm actually in jail right now. They've given me an internet connection. What can you do? I can't do anything. You have wasted your phone call or I guess your internet comment. So don't ask me those questions. Otherwise, absolutely, I will answer anything. Josiah Fitch says, as an Ohio State fan, I'm more concerned with your football alliances than your politicals. Yeah, I get that. Like I said, I actually really enjoy having Buckeyes in here and Spartans in here and Wolverines in here as well. We can be that melting pot of Big Ten fandom. But obviously, on given Saturdays this fall, we are mortal enemies, and I will not speak to you. That's the fun of college football, right? You get to have that fun and then come back to everything when the weekend is done. And in any given loss scenario, I'm sure you all will mention it to me on that Monday headlines and hangouts. I am positive. What else we got going here? At Hoeg Law, Angel Palma, assuming Sony would want to acquire Square Enix, it's a possibility, and knowing Square has a pending sale of some of their studios, yes. Would Sony have to wait after that sale closes first? No, you wouldn't have to wait. Everybody understands the various contractual situations. Square can't promise to sell you Crystal Dynamics, for instance, but you could go through due diligence and you could go through that process. No, a lot of the times, especially if there's a breakup of a company kind of like that, you don't have to wait necessarily, at least to get the preliminaries done. You'd still want to do them in order so everything made sense from a legal perspective, and tax would drive it a little bit. But no, there wouldn't have to be waiting. But from our perspective, just to add a clarification to that answer, it would look like waiting to us. Nothing would be publicly announced before things are finalized in one way or the other. So they could be working on something behind the scenes. That is absolutely possible legally. They wouldn't announce it publicly, so it would look like waiting to us. So I'll take both answers there as a lawyer does. Yeah, let's see. What else we got here? Hoeg Law, I sent you a Twitter message with a bunch of questions I flagged earlier. Okay, all right, hold on. All right, my wife is getting dynamic here technically. So let's pull up Twitter while we go and see what my wife has flagged. Oh, we're getting fancy over here. Oh, a bunch of these. Wow. Okay. All right. Well, I can't pop them up on stream, but I can talk through them with you. Thoughts on dates declared for Elon versus Twitter trial. Will it be public? I don't think it will be public, but if it is, it will be covered here. You can bet your whiskers. The dates are going to be sometime in mid-October. They're fighting over which week in October. Will you cover the Alex Jones trial? No, I know nothing about that. But somebody in the legal community on YouTube might. Elon versus Twitter. I was unaware they were in litigation. Have I got videos for you? We actually go through the Twitter complaint document line by line for about 3 hours. Check it out. Put it on in the background while you're running, cleaning up the house, whatever it is. It's fantastic stuff. We will be covering Elon. I don't want to guarantee, lawyers don't guarantee, but we will be covering them this week, I think, because they are having a fight about when to have the trial, and I'll probably do a video on that. Question: is the possession 9/10 of the law a real thing? Kind of. You certainly want to be in possession more than you don't want to be in possession, because the law moves to change things, right? So, but it moves slowly, as we have said. So if, for instance, you're in a contract dispute and the other side thinks you owe them money, you would rather be holding on to that money and going to court than having paid them and trying to get it back, because you should always assume that the law is going to prefer the default, the status quo, over changing something. So that's what it means. Possession is more important, because if you're possessing something, you're already getting the benefits of whatever we're talking about, and you don't have to rely on the court to actually get off its butt and do something. So that's generally what it means. Question: in an appeal, can a judge find that they were too lenient to the loser and give them more penalties? I hesitate to say no, because it'll be like jurisdictions, but in general, an appeals court is acting within the bounds of what has already been decided. So yes, an appeals court can do other things. They have equitable power as well. I am the wrong person to ask as to how that is used very often. Generally speaking, when I see them, an appeals court will say something was done wrong, and it's vacated or it's remanded for further look at the trial court level. The appeals court is not determining things at that level, isn't coming up with remedies on its own. In general, lawyers, what can I say? We hedge. Question: what is the difference between an NDA and a confidentiality agreement? Nothing. Those are the same. Does the current trend of adapting games into film and TV concern you? Doesn't concern me. It's not an existential crisis, but I don't love the way they've been adapted. That Resident Evil show is, ugh. If they are decent, both critically and or commercially, isn't that a risk worth taking? Sure. I'm all for more stuff. All of the publishers are in on this. Yeah, I think they see it as a possible avenue of using their IP and exploiting it in a new way. I don't begrudge them that. I would just see those translations be more true to the actual underlying intellectual property, and not wear something like the Resident Evil name as a skin suit over a teen drama discount store Walking Dead show. But that's just me. Okay, you got it. All right. Honey, you sent like 400 questions. I will be back. I have to monitor the current questions and the super chats as well. Mrs. Hoeg Law is on it today. So just hang on one second here. The AI Democracy, Slayer to me is hands down my favorite band. What do you listen to? What do I listen to? Honestly, if I'm trying to work, I'm listening to things without lyrics. So that's going to be music soundtracks or video game soundtracks for the most part. If I'm not trying to work, I got driving music, which is like surfer alt pop variations like Boys Like Girls, those kinds of things. That's what I tend to like to get excited about, like traveling. I also have what I call the run mix, which is basically just a series of songs that have a hard driving drum. But I like a lot of pop culture. I'm probably the worst at music. I don't get deep into any of those things, other than I really love music compositions in video games and movies. So I have like favorite composers and things like that. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, by the way, that score is awesome. Travis, when he gave the review and when he came onto the show, he undersold it. So I'm looking at you, Travis. We'll be talking tomorrow. But it is an awesome soundtrack. I leave the title screen on just to listen to right now, but I appreciate it. I'll try to think on better answers than that. But yeah, I mean, it's mostly soundtracks. Law and Lumber, happy Saturday. How are you awake, man? If you didn't see Rob on Twitter saying this is the first time I've done what did you say, sundown to sun up project in a while? This man stayed up through the night to get you a video on making things in his workshop. No question, just wishing you and everyone a great weekend. Thank you, Rob. For those of you that don't know, Rob has signed up for the Lawyers and Dragons season we're putting together, which will be coming sooner than you think, hopefully. And so Rob is going to be on the channel a bunch. I hope you like him. If you don't, just don't let us know, because we can't take it. We're very sensitive souls. What else do we got here? Let's go back to my wife's list of 600 questions. Hoeg, how bothered are you by inaccurate Western localization of Japanese games? From Persona to Fire Emblem to Xenoblade to recently Live Alive, it makes me not want to play the games at all. Well, I'm not bothered insofar as I'm not doing the homework to compare the games to how they used to be. So I'm only evaluating them on what's actually in front of me. Live Alive's a lot of fun. It's very quirky. Xenoblade, I didn't know there were any translation issues there. But again, I think for me, ignorance is bliss on this. So I'm not otherwise participating in that kind of homework, at least until the game is done. Then I will go look and see what changes have been made. But again, I'm old school, right? So I'm an older gamer. Translations were way, way, way worse not so long ago. So anything that sounds remotely like conversational English, I consider to be a win. Super 7X Fire Emblem Fates was especially bad because they straight up locked off an entire game mode. That's not good. But in general, shouldn't Western players demand better, more accurate, non-censored translations? I, again, think that if the product is good enough for you to play in what's in front of you, it's okay. But yes, ideally for kind of an artistic bent and archival purposes, you'd like to see them stay pretty true. But like I said, translations were awful. I was a big like working designs translation fan, and they were just pop culture to high heavens. What are your feelings on the Cornhuskers, Nebraska? My feelings on the Cornhuskers are that I like them. I've always liked Nebraska, with one exception, and that was in January of 1998. But we'll leave that aside. I think the Cornhuskers are a good program. I have a lot of friends that are big Nebraska fans, yeah, I think they're a good team. Our mom and papa Hoeg doing? How are they doing? They're doing great. They live here in town with me. I see them all the time. They're doing great. I haven't had the opportunity to see them in chat. Papa Hoeg popped in yesterday, really briefly. Also love Mrs. Hoeg. She's such a strong wingman for you. You are blessed. I am blessed. I really am. I have a host of blessings and a fantastic life. And I couldn't thank all of you for being here more. I couldn't thank everybody that's in my life directly more. It's been wonderful. Hoeg Law, when are you and EDB going to go over the Girardi case? Probably this week. We had scheduled it to be the first week of August behind the scenes. So we'll just have to get that together. She will be coming onto the channel here, I think. There were some social media posts that Erica is now being sued for $27 billion. Don't know. So she'll be coming over. Wait, Girardi is the one we did cover. There's a new one that I'm supposed to cover with her. There's a video of me talking about Girardi with her. That is the one where Rob and Ian are on with me, right? I'm getting my awful cases that she describes to me, and I become shocked by what she's covering, confused. But I think we went over Girardi. Maybe Mrs. Hoeg Law can link that if she can find it. All right, we got through the questions that my wife captured, and very well. Thank you, honey. You did a great job. I just wasn't expecting, as I scrolled down, to see like 40 questions there. Two Worgs Hoeg, says Rebecca. Boomer Sooner. I don't think I know anybody that's an Oklahoma fan, but I do know someone that's an Oklahoma State fan. So I don't think I can say Boomer Sooner. Yeah, see, I knew somebody would bring up Working Designs. I love the Working Designs translations. They were wacky. What else we got here? What are your thoughts on UCLA and USC joining the Big Ten? Might be a headline this week because the LA Times just came out with an expose on USC blocking the Pac-12's expansion last year before hightailing it to the Big Ten this year. But what are my thoughts? My thoughts are that college football in particular and college sports in general are not going to have the unique flavor that they once did. And I think that's a loss. That said, I think the money going to players, I think things getting changed really had to happen realistically, and is fair to the folks that are, putting their bodies on the line for the sport. But it is a shame, selfishly, that I think we're going to lose some of that unique identity. Because if you look at a map of the Big Ten and then you add in like Southern California, we end at like Nebraska. There's a big gap, and now we've added USC and UCLA, and I think it'll just start feeling like baby NFL. And to some extent, that's a big loss because they don't play as well as baby NFL. So it's always been kind of goofy watching college sports, but it's always been one of my favorite things in the world. So I hope it's great. My wife is a big USC fan, if you don't know that. So USC and Michigan games should be interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Very good. Love Lawyers and Dragons. Thank you. Yeah, Lawyers and Dragons. We're excited about it. It's going to be big time. From the legal side, what is the likelihood that Nintendo, Microsoft, or Sony would be able to acquire the Embracer Group in whole, considering the Embracer Group is fairly large studio-wise? Well, so people put up pictures on the internet about like the number of studios that some place has. That's not really the the useful question. The useful question is like how much capital is positioned around these things. What is their worth? Because that's the actual price, not the separation. You could make one company and drop down 100 subsidiaries, and you could put a picture of it up having 100 studios, and that wouldn't mean a damn thing. So they could, if they could get the cash together. Sony, understand, is way smaller than Microsoft. I try to communicate this in a lot of videos, but Microsoft has more cash on hand than I think the entire value of Sony, versus Sony having to get liquid to do the various things that it does. That's why it's much more targeted in the acquisitions that it makes, rather than Microsoft that does tend to just gobble up the whole fish, like Activision is pending right now. So could they buy Embracer? Possibly. But again, I would say it always takes two to tango. You can show up with a big bag of money, and if it's a big enough bag of money, you can convince most people to sell. But Embracer is specifically doing what I would consider a kind of roll-up strategy. They are private equity backed from the start, and they are going and getting assets to get those synergies for themselves. Now, do they have a long-term plan of actually selling to a strategic acquirer? Maybe. But I think right now Embracer is pulling in everything that I consider AA and making a really good business model out of it. So it would surprise me if they were willing to sell in the near future. So that's where I fall on that. We do have a super chat here. The AI democracy. The fact that you were responding to this is mainly because I asked it. Do you believe in free will, or is everything reactionary based on what we observe? Okay. Yes, I fundamentally believe in free will. That's what an awesome question for a super chat. I wasn't expecting to dive deep into the philosophical quandaries that have been at the heart of human existence for some thousands of years. But yes, I believe in free will. I believe that I had the option of missing this super chat, as I have to other super chatters in the past. My apologies to you generous souls that I have missed. But yeah, I don't think that everything is either reactionary, and I don't think everything is preordained. But I do think that there are patterns to what people respond to in specific ways that you can guess at what somebody's own free will do to react to something. Is that a good enough answer? I love it, by the way. Thank you for the high-end philosophy questions. Thank you so much, the AI Democracy. That's awesome. EDB stream with all of you was the best video ever, which I'm only going to take slight offense to because it's not living on my channel. It's on EDB's. But it was so much fun, wasn't it? And you did get to see a giant unicorn from me. If you've missed that, you get to see the Hoeg family unicorn and all sorts of stuff. We got to make Rob blush into a shade of red I have not seen and may not have been identified by human scientists. So if you're interested in that, that's on that video as well. That stream was firing off the rails, even trended something on Twitter. Oh, yeah, they did trend something on Twitter, didn't they, Rob? If you're still in chat, you know it. Greg Duchette just started working for Microsoft and was apparently just blown away by the sheer size of the company. Yeah, I think people lose magnitudes of scale, right? When we say Microsoft is a $2 trillion company, I think people lose how much bigger that is than a few $1 billion. $1 billion, how much bigger that is than $1 million, right? And I'm not putting myself outside of this. I'm just saying that when you talk about these huge numbers that go up by that extra zero at the end, or 3 at the end, they're vastly bigger. Microsoft is so much bigger than like the rest of the gaming industry that it's hard to conceptualize. But yeah, I have no doubt that somebody walking into Microsoft's doors would see that and go, "What?" Here's Rob. Lol. There you go. See here. What else we got going on? Super 7X, what do you think of Travis's insane recommendation that new players should start the Ace Attorney series with dual destinies? Where did he say that? If you disagree, can you grill him on this tomorrow? Yes, the place you should start the Ace Attorney series is currently called the Turnabout Trilogy, I believe. That's the original Ace Attorneys. That's what you should start with. You're dragging in all sorts of past history and characterization if you start with Apollo or Dual Destinies or anything else. So yeah, Turnabout Trilogy is where you want to start. I will talk to Travis. Well, I won't talk to Travis. Travis won't be on the show tomorrow, so I'll have to wait on all this for an extra week. Let's see here. What else we got? Lawn Lumber, saw you on the Twitter thread, re-choose snark in the newly released documents. So funny. Yeah, if you didn't see on social media, I think it was Andrea Burkhart essentially organized a crowd-funded release of all of the materials that have been released from the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial. One set of those are emails between Ben Chu on the Depp side to Elaine Bredehoff on the Heard side. And he is a snarky SOB, way past what I would do in correspondence. But litigators tend to be that way. Litigators get a little bit more up in each other's grill than the commercial transactions folks, because at the end of the day, we're trying to get married. We're trying to have a relationship between the parties after we're done, and we don't want them to hate each other. Litigators are, blowing up the marriage if there was one, or more specifically in this case, an actual marriage. And so, Rob says, for shame. I don't know why, but I take it as a well-advised comment, Rob. As a Michigan man, are you a Lions fan? So, one, love the profile photo. I will say that I am a Lions fan. I say it like I'm giving my name at an anonymous meeting of some kind. But I will also say that I'm pretty emotionally divorced from Lions successes. So I watch them more as a curiosity. I would love to see the Lions succeed. I would love to see them win. I'm a Lions fan. I have Lions paraphernalia. I've met Lions. I've gone to Lions things. My old office used to be at Ford Field. But yeah, they are so good at finding new ways to lose and somehow figuring out how to make you disappointed that I am a Lions fan that carefully curates how I feel about any given result. Secret McSquirrel, should you ask your question again? Yes, because I don't know what you asked, and I'm doing my best to keep up with chat. So absolutely. Let's see here. What else we got here with some at Hoeg Laws? We got Rob talking. We got Mrs. Hoeg Law talking. We got people in the chat doing work. Hoeg Law, what is the next series you plan to review with Mini Hoeg? I think we're going to keep that pretty organic. We might do Cobra Kai because that's the next big thing that she's really excited about. We might also do Avatar 2, the movie, when it comes out later in the year, because she's really excited about that as well. So I think functionally it should be something that she's really excited about. But yeah, who knows? If you didn't see, we put up our first postmortem with my daughter here on the channel this week. It was Stranger Things 4. Check it out if you're interested. The first 15 minutes or so are spoiler free. But she was very, very excited to do it. And people have been so, so kind about her involvement. And I'm so, so thankful for that. And I think she did a killer job. And I could not be prouder of her. I think she's great to have these conversations with. And I'm glad I got to share that with you all just a little bit. Carrie Harvey says, Chew is definitely spicy and it seemed appropriate dealing with Elaine's insane fluffery. Sometimes it is appropriate, right? I'd have to get the whole context. But yeah, it was way aggressive. And it's just not generally the way I even handle opposing counsel. But yeah. Resist Impulse question. University of Arkansas Fayetteville in-state costs $7,000 for law school. Thoughts on a mid to late 30s individual relocating to get law school done affordably, worth the loans? I don't know that I can speak to you about whether it's worth it to you. I can say that law school was fantastic for me. And I do think that an affordable law school that is otherwise convenient for you or can work for you is something that you should at least look into carefully if you're interested in these kinds of things, because I think that if you like this kind of stuff, there's a place for you coming out of any law school, right? I've said this before to people that I've worked with folks in the T14, the big fancy law schools, including Michigan, that are dumb as a box of rocks. And I have worked with people from tier 3 and tier 4 that I think are some of the best lawyers on the face of the earth. So I don't think that should stop you, the affordability or anything like that. But I can't speak to this specific law school. I can't speak to your specific position. I will say I don't think it's ever too late. We had associates that were in their, I have to think, 30s or 40s when they came out at some of the places that I've worked. And if you're willing to put in the work, if you're willing to do that job, I think any age can do it. It might just change some of what you do behind the scenes and what presents to clients and things, because sometimes they get worried about bills and whatnot. But that would be logistics down the line. I think if you're interested in it, you should definitely at least go down the line of evaluating it further. Absolutely. Let's see. Sorry to hear that, Mr. Hoeg, as a Lions fan, I'm guessing. But yeah. I read Elon versus Twitter was set for 17th to 21st. If it was actually adjudged, it might have been. Twitter was pushing for the 17th. I think Elon's pushing for the 24th. But I'd have to look at that again. I'm not looking at the documents right now. They were Twitter wanted it a week early. Elon wanted a week later. I don't know if there's been a judgment on it yet. Avatar. Avatar's not as bad as you remember. Just rewatched it with her. It's all right. Brian Bell, as a college freshman who has interest in both law and cybersecurity, I wonder if combining the two is possible / advisable for a career. What are your thoughts on the field of cyber law and similar? It is niche, but that doesn't mean it's bad, and it could be great as a pursuit for a legal career. I do work with a lot of software as a service clients. I do work with a number of clients that are focused on data protection. And there are a lot of lawyers out there, I will say, that are presenting as knowing more than they actually do. I will say also that because it is kind of a newish area of law in general, it's a lot of research. It's a lot of keeping up. It's a lot of that continuing legal education as the GDPRs of the world get revised and changed and added to different jurisdictions and things like that to go along with the securities type stuff. But to me, that seems like a natural match, and we need more lawyers talking about that kind of thing. Absolutely. Question, after hearing analysis of Amber Heard's case and what her lawyers said and did, I wonder, is there a chance Amber could successfully sue her legal team for malpractice? No, not really. They didn't fall asleep. They didn't forget things. They maybe didn't advance the best strategic arguments that they could have, but we also don't know what was being directed by Amber behind the scenes. And if you were to bring up that suit, that would probably all come out, that the privilege is destroyed once there's an actual adversarial relationship between those parties. So I don't think so. And I don't think that she could appeal on essentially ineffective counsel. They were pretty effective. They just lost. And sometimes you do. Sometimes you don't have the facts to actually win. Jenny says, I think cyber law is going to skyrocket. I tend to agree. I think it's a good place to invest. And like I said, there's nobody really doing it, and a lot of people saying they can. So if you can come in with some actual expertise, I think it'll be helpful. Are Michigan universities legally barred to disclose information about the solemn amendment in the student privacy policy? I don't know what that is. I'm sorry, possible Zoink. I don't know what the solemn amendment is. Huh. All right. Let's see what else we got. My original We Died a long time ago, says Kelly. Recommendations for a new starter system. I like lighter games, like Lego Harry Potter. Well, the obvious answer is the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch is a great game great game system for especially lighter games. I will say, however, you should also consider the Xbox Series S, as in Sam, because that game system you can purchase at a very low price. It's a magic box. I really love that system. And you can get Game Pass, which is let's just call it a $15 subscription service that has a bunch of games on it that you can check out. And see what it is that you like in modern gaming. And they have a bunch of light games, and they have a bunch of indie games in that service, as well as the harder core AAA games. So I tend to like to recommend the S and Game Pass to folks that are kind of getting back into gaming. But if you just like the Switch and you love Nintendo type games, you can only get those on the Switch if you just like lighter games. So those are my recommendations there. Claude Simeon says, I always hate when someone presents a lopsided contract to me and then gives in easily on many items, the poker method. Is it generally a bad idea to start from a reasonable point and budge less? Different philosophies are going to be different on this. I will tell you that at Hoeg Law, this is the conversation I have with clients all the time. Is it's like, I'm not going to go and be an ass and try to trick people into, your standard contract. My opinion is always that we can be slanted towards you, obviously, but we want to be in the middle. We want to be market. We want to be something that is reasonable, that we could justify if, we had to tomorrow to a judge and said, what are you doing? You're crazy. So I'm always saying, hey, let's do a reasonable approach. Within that reasonable approach, let's make the decisions that are in favor of you, but we're not going to come out with this weird draconian thing. But yeah, there is a strategy that basically says we're going to play it like poker. We're going to have this list of 20 things that we're willing to give up. We're not going to tell them what that is. We're going to draft it so that those chips are in the document, and then we'll let them take those back. They can feel good about themselves, and we can get this contract done. So that is viable. And you still are playing poker chips, even within what I described as the moderate strategy. But it's, I think it's untowards, and that's not what I'll do. And I'll tell clients that when you're going to hire a lawyer, it's like, this is what I do. I believe in trying to keep contracts as simple and efficient and svelte as possible. on the premise that if a third party ever has to read them, then we want to be clear as to what we just agreed to. So I want to do that. And we want to be reasonable within bounds, protecting you, but making sure that no side is getting absolutely crushed by ridiculous and maybe unenforceable terms. Different law firms, different lawyers will handle things differently. Hoeg Law, do you see Square's push into NFTs as a good direction for the company? Is it a response to the mismanagement of the past games being so slow to release, like Final Fantasy 15 and Kingdom Hearts 3? I am not knee-jerk against NFTs as a concept, but I don't think what Square has shown so far presents a use case for them either. So is it a good direction? No-ish. We'll see if they can come up with something that's a better use case than what they've actually presented so far. But is it a response to mismanagement? I think there's been a lot of management issues at Square Enix. I think that them selling off their Western departments have shown that they don't exactly know what they're doing. I think Kingdom Hearts 3 actually came to fruition faster than we would have thought. So I think that one worked well. That one used Unreal. It didn't use one of their in-house engines. But I think Final Fantasy is being mismanaged a lot. That's my honest opinion. My buddy is a Cooley grad, late 30s, just took the Michigan bar. Yeah, Cooley is one of those schools that sometimes gets a bum rap that I've had wonderful interactions with Cooley grads. Cooley, Wayne State, a bunch of law schools that I really loved some of the lawyers that have come out of. So yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. I hope he passed, or I hope she passed. You didn't actually identify your buddy there. You can do it. I was in college from 39 to 43. Awesome. Love it. Thank you so much, Hoeg, says Resist Impulse. Absolutely. I hope it was helpful. Mrs. Hoeg Law is advancing more work for me. Wants Rick to do a negotiation video for you all. He is so good and has such good advice. It's very nice of you to say. What is your favorite law case? McCullough v. Maryland, maybe? I really like. The one that I have covered in this space from a historical perspective is Wickard v. Filburn. Definitely not my favorite law case, other than to see how you can torture words in something like a constitution in order to arrive at the opinion you want to have. Wickard v. Filburn is not great, but I do cover it here in this space, so I really like that one. Got more people fighting with me about Avatar. You're not going to change my mind on this. EDB stream tried to get it trending again last night so Law and Lumber could start his morning with a big WTF. Did you know? We weren't even over there last night. I'm going to have words with Emily. Let's see here. Mickey Merch, still stuck with lawyer agency. If lawyers are not agents, see Amber Heard versus Johnny Depp. How come when lawyers argue, we say Amber Heard argued? So that's, in a point of fact, that is the client arguing to the court. So the court will always say that it's the actual principal that is doing the arguing. They have hired people to do that for them. Agency as a concept is a different thing than we think of as like a representative. Lawyers are representatives of their clients. And so we say that Johnny Depp has said this in his lawsuit or what have you. Agency theory is saying that you are responsible for what your agent does entirely. And generally speaking, that requires an employment relationship and a notion of what the scope of that agency is, because we generally don't, as a legal system, want people to be responsible for the acts of another. You don't want to be responsible for the acts of another. I don't want to be responsible for the acts of another. So we only make you responsible for the acts of another if you have taken on this kind of employer-employee agency kind of relationship. So lawyers are your representatives. Lawyers are the knights that have their shield and their lances and go and protect you out in the combat trials. But they aren't necessarily your agents. You aren't responsible if that knight beheads the other guy. You didn't tell him to do that. You have no control over them. That said, we get into a weird agency question problem with Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. It might be one that the appeals court actually answers because it's a bit tortured in the case itself. We're going to do like a 5-minute warning here. So if you have questions, get them in. Hoeg Law, are you going to cover Musk's response when it is unsealed next week? I'm watching all of those things develop. I'm waiting until I have enough documents to talk about all at once in a video. We will be covering Elon Musk and Twitter a lot in the future. Joe Brums, we do talk about Activision Blizzard on the Group Quest podcast. Will Xbox finish the purchase? Yes, I still think the deal will go through. You may have seen me do a video this week that says the Federal Trade Commission has lost its mind, because they did. They just brought a lawsuit to block a deal that Facebook has made for a game company that makes one game and for $400 million. That is utterly insane balls. That is a legal term of art. So, use it cautiously. But I think the deal will go through, but the Federal Trade Commission is doing some wacky stuff. Uncivil law. Hey, welcome to chat. Wickard v. Filburn. Never heard of it. What's that about? Well, yes, I'm sure, Kurt. I'm sure. There is a video on this channel where you can look at Wickard v. Filburn stuff, but the long and the short of it is that they decided that even though the Constitution of the United States requires the federal government to be able to say something is interstate, between two states commerce, in order to regulate it, that making your own wheat for your own bread was still interstate commerce, because you might have bought other bread that cross state lines, and so you are depleting interstate commerce. And it created effectively everything that the federal government can do is unlimited in scope. Oh, and we're getting a bunch of super chats. Y'all are holding me late. I love it. Thank you so much. And Kurt, you know that, but I like your glibness. Mike Quaglia, if LawTube were a graduating class, I'd put you as the most talkative. Is that true? Thoughts? Who would vote as most likely to succeed? Fun fact, in high school, I won most likely to think he'll succeed. So I've never lacked for confidence. Am I the most talkative? Maybe. So, I have a background in doing some radio. I have a background in obviously presenting here on my channel. And so what I tend to do is I try to fill in if I think there's going to be a lull. And then I just take it until I think somebody else has something to jump in, and then I stop, which can mean that I'm filling in more than others if there isn't a lot of substantive conversation. Am I the most talkative? That sounds like a great poll question. Emily's pretty talkative. A lot of people are pretty talkative in this space. I wonder who's most likely to succeed. I'll just cheat. I'll say Emily. Emily's the most likely to succeed. Emily is succeeding. She's kicking butt. And then, I'm still most likely to think I'll succeed. I never have a doubt. I'm an optimistic person. So thank you for the question and for the generous super chat. I really appreciate it. I love that. We should do, what are the most likelies there? Terry says, Lucky, can you please explain subrogation on insurance claims? Still don't understand it. Thanks for all you do in keeping us educated. No, the answer is no, I can't. The short answer is that subrogation depends on a few things. It depends on how the contract is written, but it allows folks that have otherwise been put off in a situation to stand in the shoes of another. And so it's a legal term of art kind of concept. You'd actually have to think it through with how the contract operates, who was damaged, who spent money, who actually paid proceeds, that kind of thing. Essentially, subrogation at its baseline level means that you get to stand in the shoes of another. And that can mean a bunch of different things depending on context. It's not unique to insurance contracts, for instance, but that's subrogation. Hoeg Law, don't blame Emily. That was 100% her chat. Oh, yeah, I know. Chats can get away from you. Can't they, chat? Chats can get away from you. Absolutely. Talkative is dependent on the topic. Yeah. There's a goodly amounts of time, especially during trial coverage, where I would just make Jim faces at the camera for an hour or two. Bradley's very nice. You say the most stuff worth listening to, in my opinion. That is very nice of you. Probably often correct, sometimes probably not. Who knows? I'm a human being. EDB is the one who answers herself the most. Sidebar, LOL. First of all, I really enjoy Emily D. Baker's, I guess they're called sidebars, where she just kind of does what I consider like a Saturday Night Live skit, like just talking to herself. Like she pulls the document that she's reading down off the screen and then just like, it's like Gollum or something in The Lord of the Rings. I absolutely love it. She's very, very good at it. I can't do that. So I absolutely love that. All right. It is 11 a.m. Saturday morning, Eastern time zone. I have a little bit more work to do. Thank you so much for all the questions, all the generosity and super chats. Of course, thank you to the Patreon and Utreon supporters who help make all of this possible and ask the questions for question time. I had a lot of fun with you all this morning. I will be back. I will be on the Bitcast at Season Gaming tomorrow at 11 a.m. I will also be back in Hangouts and Headlines, barring some kind of catastrophe with a client issue or whatnot, on Monday morning with you all. And we'll do more virtual legality episodes, and we'll just keep cranking here at the Hoeg Law YouTube channel. Look out for Lawyers and Dragons starting up very, very soon. We are almost set there. We have almost all of our pieces in place. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun and very exciting. So, yes, I see people saying hit the like button. On your way out, if you lasted this long with me, hit a like. It's great. You can tell YouTube that this was content that you enjoyed. Leave comments. Like I said, I may be changing the question time format to something else to give more value to the supporters of the channel, but we'll see on that. I certainly had a lot of fun conversing with you all, so maybe we'll just leave it as is. Either way, have a fantastic Saturday. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you on the next episode of whatever I see you on here on the Hoeg Law YouTube channel. Bye, everybody.